Good evening to our Columbia community and welcome to our Columbia College Women Virtual Author Series. The installment of the Columbia College Women Author Series features Esinam Bediako, Columbia College Class of 2005, in conversation with Julie Satow, Columbia College Class of 1996. Together, they will discuss Essie's acclaimed debut novel, Blood on the Brain, a compelling exploration of family, identity, and resilience. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I am Nancy Pack, Columbia College Class of 1990 and Columbia Business School Class of 1995. I am the proud president of Columbia College Women. This event is brought to you by Columbia College Women, CCW, the official alumni organization for the college. The mission of Columbia College Women is to amplify the voices and leadership of women at Columbia College and across the university. We're committed to fostering a dynamic community that supports alumni and students throughout their lives. One of the ways we do this is through the CCW Scholarship, which funds the education of 1 to 2 students annually who have a demonstrated history of advocating for the advancement of women in society. It's a true grassroots effort, and I hope you'll consider including us in your annual giving. Let me introduce our authors. Esinam Bediako, Essie, is Columbia College Class of 2005 and is a Ghanaian-American writer from Detroit. She is the author of the Ann Petrie award-winning novel Blood on the Brain, 2024, as well as the essay and poetry chapbook Self-Talk, 2025. You can find some of her other recent work in Porterhouse Review, Cathexis Northwest Press, Great River Review, North American Review, and Southern Humanities Review. Essie lives in Claremont, California with her family. Julie Satow's Columbia College Class of 1996 and School of International and Public Affairs Class of 2001. She is also on the board of Columbia College Women. Julie is an award-winning journalist and the author of the New York Times bestseller, When Women Ran Fifth Avenue, Glamour and Power at the Dawn of American Fashion, long listed for the Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Nonfiction, and named Best Book of 2024 by Amazon, the Financial Times, Cosmopolitan, Smithsonian, the New York Post, and Vogue. Her first book, The Plaza, The Secret Life of America's Most Famous Hotel, was a New York Times Editor's Choice and an NPR Favorite Book of the Year. Last year, Julie was a featured author on this program, and today she will be the interviewer, and we are so thrilled. Please note that you can purchase a copy of Essie's Blood on the Brain on Indie Pubs. Get 20% off using the promo code CCW Alum. That's CCWALUM at checkout. Let's get started. Over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Nancy. Essie, I'm so excited to talk with you. I absolutely love the book. We have a lot to get to, but I feel like it's only fitting that we start off by learning just a little bit about your Columbia roots, maybe before we get to the actual book. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, your Columbia experience.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Julie. I'm really excited to be in this conversation with you as well. And yeah, I am Columbia College Class of 2005. I can't say that, it sounds like so long ago, but also it doesn't feel like that long ago. But yeah, and so I started, a few weeks before September 11th. So that was sort of like, an into the fire sort of experience for me and my classmates. But, so it was a little rough there in the beginning because it's like you're leaving home and going into this world that is all of a sudden crazy in new ways, I suppose. But I'm ultimately, I was really glad that I was at Columbia because it was and I had such a great experience in terms of finding community, both in the creative writing program and English department, and like the protagonist of my novel, I worked at the library. I really loved my library coworkers, and I was part of the Black Student Organization and did stuff with theater stuff, and just but not acting, just writing stuff for the theater. But yeah, I just as a pretty shy person from the Midwest, sort of coming in, it was sort of a little bit of a culture shock for me, but ultimately it was a really great experience for me.
Wow, that is intense, having just dealt with 9/11 again, the anniversary. So also I should say that class of 2005 is not a long time ago. I'm class of 96. So there you go. Okay, so before we get to the book again, I think you're going to do a short reading for us. So I'd love you to maybe just introduce it and do a reading, and then we can get down to the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, so I'm going to read a little bit from the beginning. And my protagonist, Akosua, has just basically she's just asked someone out on a date and the person said no. So she's been rejected. And at the same time that he rejected her, he also mentioned that her father was in town, her father that she hasn't seen in 20 years. So it's like a lot happening right before this scene, but she's calling her mom to sort of digest everything that's just happened. For people who have the book, it's page 14. I tear off my gloves, hat, and winter coat, throwing them around the room piece by piece as I press the phone to my ear, listening to my mother attempt to placate me in her perpetually amused voice. So, the engineer turned you down for a date, huh? He says he's too busy? Well, it is possible. He is an engineering graduate student, very, very serious with his pocket protector and protractor. She lets out a giggle. I can picture her slapping her knee, swiveling in her favorite chair at the kitchen counter. Trust me, I know that type of man. You are better without him. But, Mom, you don't even like him that much anyway, she says. Every weekend you talk to him, he's nice, he's smart, he's an engineer like your father, but that doesn't mean he's worth all this effort. This has nothing to do with Daddy, I mumble. She snorts. Funny that 3 months ago is when you started stalking this boy, and 3 months ago is when we heard that your father had come back to the US. What she doesn't know is that 3 months ago is also when I broke up with Wisdom. Then again, she doesn't really know that Wisdom and I were together in the first place. Whenever we start hearing news about your father, you run toward anything Ghanaian, she says. Whenever we hear news about my father, my mother starts running away from anything Ghanaian. When I was 7 and he left us, she stopped going to Ghanaian Bible study. When she heard he was divorcing his second wife, Mom moved from my childhood home in Detroit, the house she and my dad bought together, to an apartment miles away in West Bloomfield. Then, when the gossip among the Ghanaian community in Michigan got too thick, she moved across the border to Windsor, Canada, where she now lives in a condo community with a mix of elderly people and young families. No one there knows or cares about her love life. They just like that she smiles and waves and gives out whole candy bars to their kids at Halloween. Mom, I don't want to talk about that, I said. I want to talk about why I'm a prime target for rejection. Why don't guys like me? The question you should be asking is why you like men. Name one thing that one has done. Name one that has done something good for you. She laughs wildly. The sound always reminds me of a spooked flock of birds, a flutter of wings escaping to the sky. Mom, you always say that love is important, that I should go for it, blah, blah, blah. Well, you should go for it, I suppose. That's what people do in life. But I'll tell you, you shouldn't expect to enjoy it because it has to do with men and that can't bring you much good. I am crying. I've been crying without realizing it. Daniel bores me. He is an objectively handsome man whose Ghanaian accent and rumbling voice evoke a pallid pleasure. He is someone to talk to once a week about nothing. Why am I crying over him? Luckily, my mother stops cackling in that way that makes me feel that she is lonelier than I am, and she speaks in the sweet, buttery tone she saves for when I really need it. The only good thing any man has brought me was you. I'll stop there.
That's a very good piece to read because I think it just really talks a lot about all the dynamics at play in this novel, which there is so much going on. And it really comes through even in sort of, dialogue just between a daughter and her mother. But maybe you could just step back. For most people probably have not read the book yet. So why don't you give a brief synopsis of what the book is about, and then we can get into some deeper questions.
Yeah, sure. Blood on the Brain is um, basically about a young Ghanaian-American woman. She's 24 years old. She's in grad school at a school that may or may not be, it pretty much is, from Columbia without the name being there. And she's in grad school, but not really taking enough classes. She's floundering a little bit in terms of her social life and work life. And she's kind of just broken up with her boyfriend, but he's still in her life. And she's going after this other new boy named Daniel because she's trying to distract herself from the fact that her father has suddenly reappeared in her life after 2 decades of absence. Then on top of all that, she gets a head injury. And that is sort of the catalyst to her coming of age story and sort of starting to grapple with all the different chaotic things in her life.
Yeah, the book feels like it's very much sort of an exploration of identity. Your protagonist, like you mentioned, she's just sort of exploring adulthood. I think she's 24 and really kind of on the cusp of becoming an independent person. Her relationship with her mother is changing, and she's exploring that. Her dynamic with her older relatives. She's also a first generation American, and there's a lot of exploration of her Americanness and her attachment to Ghanaian, culture. So I'm just wondering, as I was reading this, did you set out with that intention, or did the plot come first and then you just realized that these themes were emerging?
Yeah, I would say that I definitely knew when I set out writing this almost 20 years ago that I wanted to write something about a Ghanaian American young woman who was kind of dealing with what it means to be Ghanaian American and what it means to kind of try to become an adult when you're also trying to figure out your ethnic and racial identity, your womanhood, all of those different themes. I wanted to touch upon those. I guess really just because that's the stage that I was in when I started writing this book. And yeah, the plot didn't really come to me until later. I actually had this same protagonist in a totally different other plot for a while. Um, uh, yeah, and then I really decided I do want to explore this idea of family connections and what it means to be missing an important part of your family, your father, and what it would mean to be grappling with that as an adult, as a younger adult. So yeah, I kind of knew that I wanted to touch on those themes. I didn't quite know what the story would be until the first version sort of like wasn't working out, and then I was like, okay, I need to make this about something that really means a lot to me, which is exploring those family connections.
Well, I couldn't help, but ask while I was reading it, how much was autobiographical? I know it's her debut novel. I don't know if, that necessarily matters, but I wasn't sure how much you were drawing on yourself with this.
Yeah. I Well, so I would say that a lot of the demographic information is is similar to my life. So I also I'm Ghanaian-American. I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit, and I went to New York for school. And I also have a similar family situation to this protagonist as well. But I would say everything about the way she reacts and the way that she processes her father coming into her life, I intentionally wrote as um, to be the opposite of myself, or to be as different from me as possible. And I guess that's part of what I was touching on when I was saying that my first version of this novel, which I started when I was in grad school at Sarah Lawrence, that version had of someone who was basically reacting the way that I would react to everything that was happening around her. And I think because there wasn't enough distance between that character and myself, it just wasn't coming off as very interesting. And, I kept getting these comments in workshops about, yeah, the protagonist is a little bit of a Mary Sue, which I guess is a term for, kind of a boring character who nothing happens to her. She's just good and observing things that are happening around her, and they're bad, she's good. It's just I guess a trap people can fall into when you're first writing a story, or trying to write a novel. So I basically told myself, like, I'm just gonna think about the things that I want this character to react to things in the way that is like maybe what I sometimes feel like doing inside, but would never actually do. So yeah, I think the people who know me as they were reading it, they're like, whoa, that's crazy. You would never do such a thing. And I'm like, yeah, but doesn't everyone maybe think about doing that? And so, yeah, I think that's probably also where the whole, she's basically distracting herself with these two love interests as a way to forget about the woes, of, whether or not she should be in touch with her father. And, that's um, something that I, have observed other people around me doing, but kind of not the way that I'm kind of a little bit more just like cautious and guarded and things like that in a way that she isn't. So yeah, it's really not autobiographical, other than some of those, like cultural touch points, I guess.
I know it's so interesting choosing what to keep that's close to you, what is familiar, and what to change, because obviously Colombia, for instance, um, it's a big part of the book in the sense that there is like a sense of place, it's taking place at a college in New York, but you even mentioned College Walk. I think it's like, for those of us who know, it's pretty obvious it's Colombia. So clearly, like, that is a place you feel very comfortable with. I guess the age was somewhat similar to her Akosua's age was similar to yours. So there was all these things that are similar, but yet that internal life, you decided to really depart from who you are. So that's so interesting when you're a writer, kind of making those choices of what to keep and what not to,
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think
Um,
part of it might even be because it's it's really hard for me sometimes to write settings. So I kind of was like, I want to set this in a place that I feel very, I know this setting, so that it was easier for me to try to draw upon my memories of Columbia and also of Michigan, and to kind of make sure I wasn't giving setting short shrift, which is something I tend to do.
Hmm. Hmm. No, for sure not. I mean, it really came through, it reminded me so much of being up at school. So, um, no, but there's so much, obviously, and we've mentioned this a little bit, but there's so much in the book about the immigrant experience. you write very beautifully, very poignantly about sort of a sense of loneliness that your character has, without having her immediate family there. It's the holidays, there is kind of a sense of loneliness about her, but also about sort of found family. She's got wisdom, you mentioned, she's got a best friend. I just was hoping you could talk a little bit about that and what that process was like.
Hmm. Yeah, I really felt like it was important to touch upon that idea of found family. Pretty early on in the novel, Akosua sort of has a memory of being younger and looking at the photo albums of her her parents when they were younger, and like how they were meeting other Ghanaian couples in Detroit and kind of making their own found family that later became her family, her aunties and uncles. And that was really important to me because I think that I mean, found family is something, it's, all of us can relate to that. But I think for me, especially as someone coming from an immigrant family, that's what I was used to as well. Your blood relatives are often, thousands of miles away. I've only been to Ghana 3 times in my life. So, I feel really close to certain relatives there, but I they don't know what's going on in my life on a regular basis. I don't know what's going on in their lives. So it's a different kind of family bond. And I wanted to highlight how how found family is so important. And also kind of, I wanted to highlight how sometimes you can take it for granted or not know that it's really there. I think there are moments where she thinks of, so she has this aunt and uncle whose names are both Fergie. She sees the Fergies as, sort of these elders that she has to put up with almost. But then they end up being people that she can really lean on in different ways. And I think that's part of, becoming an adult, which I mean, I think coming of age is always happening, but is part of becoming an adult, and growing is just kind of learning that the people who are around you, that what are they there for? Are they there for support? Are they there for you to help? Are they someone who maybe someone who seems like a good Ghanaian man, but then isn't one, like Daniel, or maybe is, or we don't know. But so yeah, I think just coming to understand one's relationship with the people around you, I think is really an important idea that I wanted to touch on in the novel.
Yeah, it's so interesting you mentioned Daniel, one of the men, one of her love interests, and it starts to get a little uncomfortable, dangerous, there's a situation, but you really stop short of taking it further. And I was interested in that just because, for dramatic effect, you could have gone further down that road. You decided to hold back, anyway, the just noting that it was I thought, was a good choice in many ways because it kept the attention on her rather than on her journey rather than this other kind of incident happening to her. Although there is so much that happens to Akosua. I mean, that's one of the things I had noted about her, is that it feels like, she struggles with agency. Everything keeps happening to her rather than her actively making decisions. She hits her head. Her relationship with men. I don't know. I kind of wanted to shake her and get her to take charge a little bit. I'm just wondering what that was about and why you decided to kind of have her kind of struggle with her own agency.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that I can't speak for all children of immigrants, but I just know from my own experience and the experience of other people around me, other family, friends, and people I met at Columbia and such, that sometimes if you are from a very a culture that's about respecting elders. Almost, that's the paramount thing you need to do, is respect your elders and kind of do as you're told, and represent your family well, all of those things. That sometimes that can take away your sense of agency if you're someone who's already kind of um, floundering in some other way. It might be hard, or if your personality is just a little bit more you know someone who likes to take the back seat a little bit more. I mean, I think that cultural sort of background can make it so much easier to just feel, so it can make it easy to feel like things are just happening to you. And I think there's a couple places where she says everything just keeps happening and happening. And I think that whether it's something like the way that Akosua kind of things keep happening in that, and they're not great things, like as she hits her head, she's, possibly going to lose her scholarship to grad school, those kinds of things. I mean, those it can also be a situation where things keep happening and happening to you, and they're good things as well. So, I think there's some mention in the novel of how when she was in high school and in certain parts of when she was in undergrad, that she did really well. And, it's almost, that doesn't make it that better though, because even though she was doing well, she still didn't really have agency. She was just kind of doing what was expected of her. And so that to me is a part of the um, immigrant experience that I really wanted to highlight. Just the fact that in some ways, I mean, being a part of community and putting your family first and all of those things are good qualities, but they can also kind of make you feel a little bit lost as an individual. Um, so yeah, that's kind of why I inserted that in there.
Yeah, I mean, even her relationship with Wisdom, who was her, sort of more steady boyfriend, he really cares for her, but it's unclear how much she feels, there's a lot of receiving, I feel like, of emotion necessary, not as much, you know. Um, no, it's so interesting. I mean, and another thing that's just I noted is that the other two women in the novel, I mean, two of the other major characters, her mother, kind of keeps moving away. You mentioned she like started out in Michigan, right? Then she moved there. And now she's in Canada. She's moving farther away, and she seems to have quite a bit of agency in the way. I don't know, that was the feeling I had. And then, of course, her best friend is a very different kind of a woman. She seems like a total go-getter. It's got it all figured out. And of course, Akosua feels some envy about that, but I just thought that was interesting, that kind of how it puts her lack of agency into higher relief. I don't know
Yeah.
if that was intentional, but
Yeah, I definitely wanted, for her mom to seem like sort of this formidable model of, why can't I be more like her? But then at the same time, there's some aspects to her mom that she doesn't want to be more like. But then with her friend Ella, I also thought it was important, that she's also an immigrant. And actually, she grew up in Jamaica. So she, has a different experience, but she's also a different person. And so I kind of wanted to show that obviously not every person has this same experience of coming and or being part of two cultures and ending up feeling lost between them, and not having agency. I wanted to show that there's different immigrant experiences. And yeah, Ella is someone who I think is a really good rock for Akosua, but also an easy way for Akosua to just kind of be like, I can't be as good as her, and so I'm just gonna not do
yeah.
anything, which, you know,
kind of an easy, right? That's true. Well, I mean, another recurring theme, I think, I felt like was division. You know, there's like this generational divide, which we've mentioned a little bit between your protagonist and her older relatives, whether auntie and uncles or, you know, her father, parents. There's also like a language divide. You know, you talk a bit about Ghanaian, like, slang and phrases versus English. There's also kind of that impending failure from school and the idea whether she's going to pass her classes or fail. I don't know. I just wonder about if you could speak a little bit about this sort of sense of divide that also kind of pervades the book.
Yeah, I wanted to think about the parts of well, basically what makes up culture and how what can cause someone to feel like they're between two cultures. And definitely thought about, of course, language, and not just that she doesn't know her mom's language, Ewe, very well, but she also doesn't know the slang that Wisdom speaks with his younger Ghanaian friends. She feels like she doesn't fit in with the older Ghanaians or the younger Ghanaians. She also, I wanted to put a focus on food as well, just because I think that's such a big part of culture, and also because, I mean, you have to spotlight the Ghanaian food. But I think, to have that be a point of contention between her and her mother, like, oh, you never taught me how to make Ghanaian food, is something that, I thought it would just be an interesting way of sort of showing that otherness that she feels from Ghanaian culture. And um in a way, it was something that I don't know, I just kind of added that detail in there without thinking about it much. And then when I went to look back at it, I was like, that's interesting, because I actually think that, I don't know, from my personal experience, I feel like a lot more Ghanaian mothers are always trying to teach their kids, how to cook. That's how my mom always has been. And I'm always like, I can't do it as well as you. But in this case, I think that part of her mom's, trying to have agency and trying to be independent in some ways was, kind of took her away from her own culture a little bit. And Akosua maybe doesn't even realize that that's something her mom is going through, that, she's not the only one who might be feeling a little bit estranged from her own culture. But yeah, I always think it's fun to explore those kinds of ideas through, like, food and language and music. And so yeah, I hope.
Yeah, I mean, as you're saying that, I'm also thinking, there was a lot of kind of question of like what it means to be a woman, like the Ghanaian, like the cultural expectations of her being able to make certain dishes or cooking for her man or, whatever it might be. And like whether, she's enough of a woman or what kind of woman, it's just, it was so poignant. Like I mean, it made me think a lot about because you don't often, I mean, it's more front and center, obviously, in this novel than a lot of times the way I think about it, which is really so fascinating. I mean, the other thing that was so interesting to me was the medical diagnosis, which we haven't talked about a little bit, but I don't know if did you have some personal experience with that? It feels like you did quite a bit of research, or maybe you already knew about brain injury, but there was a lot I did not know about that and how random it could be and how impactful that could be. So.
Yeah, I definitely did a lot of research about uh, brain injuries and post-concussion syndrome. And it really was sort of a fluke that I didn't intend for the book to actually focus on her head injury that much, or to have, hitting her head be a metaphor for growing up or coming of age or anything like that. But basically, she falls and hits her head, and then and that was the inciting event that would make her friends, Ella and Wisdom, come to her so we could see, what that dynamic is and see how she depends on other people, etc. But then when I wrote that originally, I started thinking like, if you fall and hit your head in the shower, that's a pretty big deal. Like is she going to be okay? And so I sort of started researching like what would actually happen to someone if you were standing and you slipped and fell and hit your head on the tub. I mean, that can be a pretty serious injury. So then I started researching and went down this pigeonhole of kind of looking up, how hard do you have to hit your head for something serious to happen? And basically what I learned is that it can be sort of random and unexpected, where you might hit your head and feel fine, and then you end up having this very serious life-changing injury, or it could be a big hit and end up not being so, as much of a big deal as you would think. And so I think this was also around the time when people, in the news, there were lots of conversation about football players and concussions. And so I do like to kind of go down, I think I said pigeonhole before, but go down that rabbit hole sometimes of researching something that isn't relevant. But in this case, it actually ended up being relevant, because I kind of realized that this idea of, if she has this concussion, and post-concussion syndrome has all these different symptoms that come along with it, and um, how does she's already grappling with, how is she making these decisions in her life? Who's making these decisions? Is it, and now she has to put on top of that, is it me? Is it this the way I really wanted to act? Or is it my concussion? Or is it that I'm just depressed? And I just thought it would be interesting to explore it through that lens.
Yeah, I felt like it was a perfect vehicle because, you could see in the reading that you gave, there's humor in the story, there's quite a bit of humor. And, hitting your head in the shower, it kind of sounds like a kind of a ridiculous, fluke or something, or almost has a bit of a humorous kind of feel to it. But
Yeah.
or that at least it would be innocuous, but then it's not. It has like a deeper, lasting impact, and kind of how things can all of a sudden that seem so safe, even like Daniel, let's say, or something, could turn into something that's not what they appear. I don't know. It just
Yeah.
felt like it was very much the appropriate vehicle. So I really love that. I was going to ask a last question. I see we have quite a few from the audience, so I want to get to those. I think for me, I'd love to end just my questions with a bit about the writing process. When did you decide to become a novelist? How do you approach the writing process? Do you typically, are you a plotter or a pantser, for those people who might know? Like, do you plot out a story in advance, or do you kind of just go by the seat of your pants and see where it takes you? Your schedule, all that kind of stuff. I just love to know how you work a bit.
Yeah. So I've always known that I wanted to be a writer of some kind. From ever since, my mom and sister and I would go to the library and read books, and I was like, I'm gonna have a book published in this library someday. And, I've always just wanted that. So I guess, I kind of felt pretty strongly about, after college, I was like, I want to go to grad school for creative writing, because that's the way to officially become a writer, which is not really, that's not a thing. But I'm not anti,
Seems
I
like
mean,
a thing. I got it.
I did like my MFA experience, but that's obviously not the only way to do this. But I would say, being at Sarah Lawrence, that's where this story started. And I finished this novel, the first draft of this novel, as my thesis, and then tried to get it published when I was like, in my 20s, like Akosua. And then when I couldn't, I didn't really like try to proofread it or anything. I was just like, okay, I need to make money. I need to get a job. And so I went into teaching, which I really loved. And then I kind of put my creativity, instead of it being focused on writing at all. I focused it on lesson planning and, I loved teaching. I taught high school English, and it was really, I loved the experience, but it also just kind of took me away from writing for many years. Um, and it wasn't until the pandemic, when I stopped working, because I had, at the time, my kids were pretty young and they were home, and it was hard to work. And, everybody know, I don't have to talk about the pandemic, but, that time period, when I was home and not working, I started writing a little bit more and started, came back to writing. And then I picked this book back up and, revised, just started trying to revise it. So I don't know if I'm even answering the question anymore, but
Oh, you totally
yes,
are.
I would say I think I started saying all that because I don't feel like I have a process down yet, because I went so many years without writing regularly. Um, and I have two kids, and I have a day job. I write for a nonprofit called the Spondylitis Association of America. Um, and I have not yet figured out how to balance all those things so that I do write regularly. And Yeah, so I don't think I really have much of a routine down, but I just try to fit in a little bit of writing, um, at least a couple times a week, usually at night when everybody is sleeping. And I think a part of the reason why I mentioned that whole, like, oh, it took me almost 20 years to write this, is because I think that when I was younger, I was more of a pantser, and that, kind of just flying by the seat of my pants is what got that first draft out. But then the revision process, you know, what that I went through like a couple years ago when I came back to this book, was, I feel like I was a lot wiser in that, I kind of understood more the value of plotting things out. And I, through teaching high school English, I was used to telling my students, like, revision is the fun part. You can re-envision the novel and all the stuff that I used to say to them. I was like, oh, I'm going to actually do that. And, plotting things out, that was very helpful to kind of get this into a state that I thought was ready to be published. So yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, plotting and pantsing. Um, but yeah, I think
Are
that,
you working on a new book? Is that so? Yeah, are you
yeah.
still, and are you back to teaching, or are you writing
Um,
full time?
yeah, I
You
just
said
don't.
you're at the nonprofit. Sorry, right.
Yeah. So I write for the nonprofit, right now, which is a really great job and flexible. I work from home, so that's, maybe I'll teach a little later on down the line when I'm, but for now, working from home and, working for a cause I believe in is really important too. And I think helps make my creative writing a little stronger when I'm
Mm.
feel like I'm, for my job, I actually get to finish stuff. I'm like, oh, I finished that newsletter. It's done, as opposed to writing a novel for so many years. But yeah, I am working on another novel, and yeah, this one also kind of focuses on a health issue. It actually focuses on spondyloarthritis, which is the organization that I work for. I have this autoimmune disease, and I kind of try and explore. I'm not very far in the novel, but kind of exploring what I would want to write about that highlights, people who go through chronic illness and that kind of thing. So that's what I'm working on now. Very much pantsing at this point. So
Process. I'd love to open it to some of these questions. So let's see. Okay. So Savannah from the class of 24, which is awesome, recent grad. Do you have any advice for aspiring novelists and journalists?
well, you would probably give the journalism advice, but I would say, really just, I mean, this sounds trite, but don't give up, because I mean, I basically I kept putting this dream of like, I'm going to publish a novel someday on hold. And I don't think I ever quite gave up on it, but there were times when I was like, maybe I'll do it like when I retire or whatever it may be. Or, even when I started writing more and submitting pieces to magazines and stuff like that, I would get rejected and um, sort of be okay with it because I was like, well, at least I'm trying. After so many years of not trying, it just felt good to be trying again. And I would say, I just based on the people I know as well, who've been published, it's like I mean, it depends on what you want out of publishing. I am not gonna ever probably like make any money off of it, but I just love the idea of sharing my work with other people, and that's definitely possible if you just keep at it and don't give up. And there's so many different ways to get published too nowadays. So yeah, I would
Yeah.
just say,
I really no, I really agree with that. I would say from the journalist side, in some ways, everyone's always bemoaning how difficult things are, and for like without a doubt, it's a very difficult industry right now. But one positive thing I think about journalism, especially for people starting out now, is that freelancing is a very open field. It used to be tough to get pieces placed if you weren't staff and if you didn't have a lot of experience and if editors didn't know you. There's a lot more opportunity for freelancing. So if you're starting out and you have a great story, I think there's a lot more chance that you're able to get that placed. Now, you may not get paid much money for it, but I think there's a lot more opportunity in some strange ways to get published nowadays than there were like when I was coming up, when it was much more of like a real staff. You had to be on staff kind of thing, and it was hard to get those first staff jobs. Okay, let's see. Okay, someone else asked if someone reading the book has never considered how culture shapes expectations or how trauma, even physical, affects identity, what parts of the novel do you think will resonate the most?
if someone hasn't, can you just repeat that, the very first
Yeah,
part?
if someone reading the book has never considered
Yeah.
how culture shapes expectation or how trauma, even physical trauma, affects identity, what parts of the novel do you think will resonate the most? I mean, wow, I feel like the whole novel it really tackles those topics, but I don't know, maybe, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I don't know how to answer that exactly, but
I
I
know.
hope I hope the whole novel, but then
Yeah, I think,
also
yeah,
yeah, I think just even just by following the protagonist, the fact that it's in her this story is very limited to her point of view and first person and present tense, which I hope I don't really ever want to write that like that again. It was very intense and sort of difficult to stay in that voice. But I think it really does illuminate, you know, the mental and emotional state that she was in and help to highlight those the effect of the culture that she's in and the experiences she's had. And so yeah, I mean, I think I hope that the way it's written, the perspective from which it's written will actually sort of help to understand that. Um, yeah, hopefully
hmm.
I don't think I answered
Yeah,
that
no, I
question.
mean, that's a tough question. Okay. Here's a combination of two questions. And I think this might be one of the last ones. Here we go. Um, Someone says, I also had a concussion when I was 24. Mine was from a car accident where the car was totaled. I'm 27 now, and I'm still dealing with post-concussion syndrome, including frequent pressure headaches and really short-term memories. For readers who have endured brain injuries, your novel offers both recognition and metaphor. How do you hope those readers will connect with Akosua?
Oh, thank you for that question. I think that when I did my like mini big book tour, when the book first came out, I was fortunate enough to meet a few people along the way who, they came to my talks or my readings because they were interested in the whole, the blood on the brain aspect of things, the head injury aspect. And I, I think that it's, as someone who I was just interested in the topic, but then meeting these people after doing the research I did and getting to know this character that I created, and then meeting these people who actually had these experiences of, what can be pretty debilitating and long-term injuries. I just really hope that I think representation is really important. Seeing that these issues are talked about, I think is really important. I also, as I said, I have a chronic illness. I've never had anything related to, post-concussion syndrome or anything of that sort. But, I think just talking about, fragility, whether it's, um, you can have, not fragility, but I guess what I mean is, showing that sometimes I feel like often the way that we write about women or women of color, is just showing them as strong, strong Black woman. And I think that is very important to show that, but to also show vulnerability, that's the word I was looking for, that it can be emotional vulnerability, it can be, physical as well. And I think it's important to have a balance to show that as well, and not only just so, because we can't always just be we can't just be strong women all the time. We have to be human and, have vulnerabilities. And so I did, and also strengths too. I mean, I think Akosua shows, that you can do certain things to recover and be more proactive about your health and recovery, both in terms of her, mental health and her physical health. So yeah, I think those are really important ideas that I hope I'm representing well in the book.
Well, Essie, I love the book. It has really stayed with me. I've thought about it a lot since I finished reading it. It was such a joy to get to ask you these questions and have this conversation and to meet you. So, thank you so much. And thank you everyone to the audience. I think Nancy's going to give us a few last minute things, and I'll throw it over to Nancy now.
Thank you, Essie and Julie, for this evening's conversation. Very inspiring and very thought-provoking. And Essie, thank you for bringing Akosua to us, an amazing and fascinating person, and bringing her to life has been, amazing. Thank you for sharing your insights with our community. A big thank you to all the alumni, students, and friends who have joined us this evening. I will just throw in to say, Essie, as you talk about Akosua and the idea of identity, discovery, being a daughter of Korean immigrants, there was just a lot as you talked about and as you read the passage and just the book itself, bringing a lot of memories to life, and found family, and a lot of my found family having been discovered while I was at Columbia. So just the mix of everything is very poignant, very rings to my heart. And thank you so much, both of you. Really appreciate it. There's more coming from CCW in the future. Up next, we have Sweat and Connect, a self-defense workshop in New York City for those that are in the Big Apple on September 26th. There will also be From Story to Screen, the journey of an Emmy-nominated documentary. It's a live webinar on October 8th. And our alumni community is just a really great resource, and it's a shared home base. This is where mentorships are taking root, collaborations are sprouting, and doors are opening, from careers to creative projects and service. So staying connected, amplifies our impact, and together we're supporting our current students. We're strengthening programs like the CCW scholarship. We're making new connections in new places around the globe, and carrying forward the values that we have shared on Columbia's campus in the wider world. terms of staying connected, we love to keep the momentum going. So join upcoming programs, invite a classmate, or volunteer your time and expertise. And if you'd like to get more involved, or you have questions about making a gift in support of the CCW scholarship, please reach out to us at ccwomen@columbia.edu. Thank you so much for spending a part of your evening with us, and have a wonderful night. Thank you, everybody.